Welcome to Reddit Revenge Stories. Did you know over 90% of people watch these videos but don't subscribe? If you enjoy stories of justice and payback, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to like the video if you're ready for today's story. Let's get to the story. My name is Marcus Thorne. I'm 38 years old, a mechanical engineer by trade. And until recently, I believed I had a pretty solid life. I wasn't flashy, never needed to be. I liked my routines, I loved my work, and I adored my wife, Lindsay. We'd been married for 11 years, together for 14. We met back in college. She was vibrant, magnetic, the kind of woman people gravitated to without understanding why. I was the quiet one, the observer, the guy standing on the edge of the party until someone like her pulled me in. It wasn't a perfect marriage. No relationship is. But we laughed, traveled when we could, paid off our house early, and spent weekends binge-watching crime dramas and trying out new recipes. I thought we were a team. We didn't have kids, by choice, but we poured our love into each other. Or at least I thought we did. The first cracks started to show about a year ago, but I was too blind or too trusting to recognize them. I chalked up her late work hours to a big project at her firm. She's an interior designer, known for her bold style and high-end clients. She started going out more. Networking, she said. I didn't question it. I should have. It was a Tuesday when the truth started to unravel. I remember because I got home early around 4 p.m., after a site inspection got canceled. Lindsay wasn't expecting me. Her car wasn't in the driveway, but her gym bag was sitting by the front door. That was odd. She usually went straight to the gym after work on Tuesdays. I didn't want to be suspicious. I wasn't looking to play detective. But something told me to check. Call it instinct, or maybe just the residue of too many crime shows. I checked our shared calendar, nothing out of the ordinary. But then I opened our bank account. 3 charges at a restaurant downtown. 2 bottles of wine, dinner for 2, midweek. When I asked her that night how her gym session was, she smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and told me she'd pushed herself hard. That's when I knew. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started watching. Quietly, carefully. I began noting the small things, how her texts came in with her phone face down, how she changed the password she used for years, how she suddenly became protective of her laptop. I didn't want to believe it, but the more I saw, the harder it was to deny. I installed a small GPS tracker under her car. It felt wrong, invasive even, but I needed the truth. The first few days, nothing. She went to work. She came home. Then Thursday came. Her car was parked at a small boutique hotel just off the highway. Not a meeting venue, not her client zone. I waited. She stayed there for over 3 hours. When she walked in that night, she was glowing, like a woman who had just been somewhere magical. She handed me takeout and joked about a long meeting with a client who couldn't make up their mind. That night, I barely slept. My chest felt tight. My mind raced. But I still didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I called a friend of mine, Caleb, who works in tech security. He owed me a favor. I asked him to recover deleted texts from her old phone, one she had traded in but forgotten to wipe. What he found left no room for interpretation. Messages, dozens of them, sent to a man named Alan. Flirtatious, familiar, deeply emotional. Photos, too. Nothing explicit, but the kind you send someone when you're trying to look perfect for them, not your husband. I read the timeline. It started almost 10 months ago. A chance meeting through a mutual client. Drinks that turned into dates. And then weekends, getaways. A secret life she curated with someone who wasn't me. I didn't rage. I didn't throw things. I sat in our quiet kitchen staring at the phone and trying to understand how the woman who used to trace circles on my back when I couldn't sleep had become this stranger. Still, I didn't blow up. I didn't yell. I began planning. I copied everything, texts, dates, photos. I created a private folder on a flash drive and tucked it away. The next step was pretending. For the next few weeks, I became the perfect husband. I cooked. I planned a weekend trip. I even suggested we look into starting a side business, something we'd talked about years ago, but never pursued. She agreed too quickly, perhaps guilty, perhaps just eager to bury the evidence. What she didn't know was that I had already found Alan. He was married, 2 kids, suburban life, corporate job. His online presence was spotless until I dug deeper. Fake accounts, encrypted messages, even a hidden Instagram page that Lindsay followed with a burner account. Every lie they told, I was now uncovering. But I wasn't going to confront them in some dramatic showdown. That would give them closure. No, I wanted this to sting. I wanted consequences. So I contacted Alan's wife. Her name was Heather. She was a nurse, worked long shifts, and based on her social media had no clue what was happening. I reached out anonymously at first, sent her screenshots, messages, everything. I gave her proof and let her decide what to do with it. 2 days later, Alan's world imploded. He was thrown out of the house. His wife froze their accounts. The kids were moved to her parents' place. I never got involved directly, never said a word. But I watched Lindsay grow confused when Alan stopped responding to her texts, when he canceled a weekend trip they'd planned, when he suddenly blocked her on everything. She thought it was her fault. I watched her spiral, thinking it was something she did. And still, I waited. One night, she broke down, told me she felt disconnected, that something was off in her life. She asked if I felt the same. I told her I loved her. I looked her in the eyes and said I'd do anything to fix what was broken between us. She cried in my arms that night. The guilt was eating her alive, and I played the role of devoted husband flawlessly. But that was only phase one. I started recording things, her lies, her alibis, her stories. I collected evidence not for divorce court, but for something far more personal. I created a document, a timeline, every message, every meeting. I added photos, videos, receipts. I didn't know when I'd use it, but I was building something she couldn't ignore. Then I started the slow financial untying. We had joint accounts, joint investments, shared property. I opened new accounts in my name, transferred my direct deposits, redirected dividends. I sold off some of my stocks quietly, moved the funds. Then I hired a lawyer, not to file, just to prepare. Everything had to be airtight. At this point, I had all the cards. And that's when I made my move. It was our anniversary, 11 years. She woke up to roses, breakfast in bed, and a gift box containing a necklace she'd admired months ago. I made reservations at her favorite restaurant, dressed to the nines, and told her we'd have a night to remember. And she did, just not the way she expected. We toasted champagne. I smiled as she laughed. Then, as dessert came out, I handed her an envelope. She looked confused. "What's this?" "Open it," I said calmly. Inside was a single photo, her and Alan, kissing outside that hotel, her face drained of color. "There's more," I said, "but I figured we'd start small." She stammered, tried to explain. I stopped her. "I know everything, Lindsay. Every message, every lie. I've known for months." She started to cry right there in the middle of the restaurant. "Why didn't you say anything?" she whispered. "Because I wanted you to feel safe," I said, "to think you were getting away with it. I wanted to make sure when this ended, it ended on my terms." She begged, pleaded, told me it was a mistake, that she'd ended it. I told her I didn't care. I had already ended things. Then I stood up, handed her the divorce papers, and left her there. I walked out into the night, not angry, not broken, just free. But that wasn't the end, not even close. Walking away from that restaurant should have felt like a final chapter closing. I expected some sense of relief, maybe even satisfaction. But as I stepped out into the cool night air, all I felt was quiet. Not peace, not anger, just silence. Lindsay didn't come home that night. I wasn't surprised. She must have sat there for hours, processing the public unraveling of her lies. I half expected her to call, maybe leave one of those long, teary voicemails begging me to reconsider. But she didn't. Maybe because she knew. Maybe because some part of her understood she'd lost whatever power she thought she had over me. I'd already moved most of my essentials to a condo I'd secretly leased 2 weeks before the confrontation. It was nothing extravagant, just a quiet, clean space on the edge of town. I didn't need much: a bed, A desk. Peace. I had both the peace and the plan. The next few weeks were a blur of logistics. The lawyer I'd hired had already drawn up everything. I served the divorce papers publicly because I wanted the illusion of exposure to linger around her. I didn't go to her job or post anything online, but I knew word would travel. The thing about Lindsay is she built her career on the image of elegance and integrity. She branded herself as a designer with moral values, someone who curates spaces with heart. Ironic, given how hollow her own heart had become. Her clientele, wealthy suburban families, churches, local businesses, trusted her. Image was everything. And I was about to let that image erode slowly, like a mirror fogging from the inside. I never once badmouthed her. Not to friends, not to family. When people asked, I simply said, "We're going our separate ways." I let the silence do the talking because silence makes people curious. Silence makes people dig. And they did. Our mutual friends at first tried to stay neutral, but that only lasted until one of them, Samantha, called me one night. She was practically shaking through the phone. Said Lindsay had shown up at her house crying, asking why people were pulling away from her, why her referrals had dried up, why even her assistant was being standoffish. I told Sam the truth. Plain, calm. Just enough to answer her question, but not enough to satisfy her gossip itch. She was having an affair. I found out. I let her go. The next day, Lindsay's phone rang off the hook. She lost 3 clients that week. Not because I told anyone to drop her, but because the people she'd deceived couldn't trust her anymore. The carefully polished mask she wore for years had started cracking, and there was no stopping it now. But I wasn't done. Alan had been easy to dismantle. His wife had already taken care of most of it, but Lindsay still had pieces of my life, financial ties, access to some shared contacts, and, most importantly, my name. I wanted to sever all of that cleanly. We met one final time at a law office downtown. She looked different, smaller, deflated. Her hair was tied back in a way she never wore it. No makeup, eyes puffy. She signed the papers without argument. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said quietly. "You shouldn't," I replied. She nodded like she'd been waiting for that. Then she asked the one thing I didn't expect. "Was it all fake for you? The marriage? Everything?" That question hit me because no, it wasn't. I had loved her, fully, stupidly, the way only someone who didn't think betrayal was possible could love. But I wasn't about to hand her the satisfaction of hearing that. I stood, collected my copy of the divorce decree, and left her sitting in that sterile room. It was done. Legally, emotionally, practically. I could have walked away, started over, healed. But she'd taken more from me than time and trust. She had taken my belief in people. And for that, I needed one final act. You see, Lindsay had a new project on the horizon. Her dream contract. A multi-million-dollar redesign of a boutique hotel owned by a pair of high-profile investors. It was her ticket back into the spotlight. It also happened to be run by a couple I knew personally, clients of mine from a previous job, whom I had a good relationship with. I scheduled a casual lunch with them, not to sabotage, not directly. I simply asked questions about design integrity, about whether they had done background checks, about values. They picked up what I was putting down. 2 days later, Lindsay was dropped from the project. She called me for the first time in weeks. "You're doing this," she said, her voice low, almost feral. "No," I replied. "You did this. I'm just making sure you feel it." She screamed something I didn't catch before I hung up. I haven't answered a call from her since. But revenge, I learned, isn't loud. It's not the movie scene where the scorned lover screams in the rain or blows up the other's life in one grand gesture. Real revenge is quiet. It's methodical. It's walking past the wreckage with your hands clean while they wonder how everything crumbled. I never outed her publicly. I never posted a single thing online. I didn't need to. The truth has a funny way of seeping through the cracks. Eventually, people started reaching out to me. Old friends, family members who hadn't taken sides before. They apologized. Not because I needed it, but because they'd seen her mask fall off and realized who she really was. and that was enough. I went back to work, dove into new projects, started traveling again. I took a trip to Iceland I'd postponed for years. I stood near a glacier, breathing in crisp air, and felt like I was finally waking up. People ask me sometimes if I'll ever get married again. I don't know. I know I'm not bitter. I don't hate love. I just respect it too much now to give it away easily. I've learned that revenge isn't about destruction. It's about reclamation, taking back your dignity, your space, your time. It's making sure the person who tried to rewrite your worth remembers that you hold the pen. Lindsay still lives in our old house. She tried to keep it as part of the divorce, but I had the paperwork proving I paid for nearly everything. I gave it to her anyway, because every wall in that house knows what she did. Every floorboard remembers the lies she told. Let her live with that. As for me, I'm good, better than good, because I'm not broken. I'm not angry. I'm free. A full year passed. Strange how quickly time moves when you're rebuilding. One minute you're surrounded by dust and silence, and the next you're standing in a life you never imagined could feel this whole again. After the divorce, I poured myself into work. Not as a distraction, but as a reclamation. I began consulting for a handful of firms across the country, flew out to Chicago, then Portland, then Denver. My name started carrying weight again, on its own merit, not as part of a couple. I was no longer Marcus and Lindsay. I was just Marcus, and I liked it that way. I kept things simple, lived quietly, stayed off social media, focused on what mattered. But that didn't mean I forgot. Some things shouldn't be forgotten, not out of spite, but for wisdom, for protection. See, healing isn't just about moving on, it's about learning how to never be fooled again. I didn't watch Lindsay, I didn't follow her life or check in on her through friends. But the world has a way of offering updates you didn't ask for. Whispers at a networking event, a name dropped at a dinner table, a passing conversation that leaves more than it takes. Apparently, after the hotel contract fell through, Lindsay tried to rebrand. She launched an online course for ethical design professionals. The irony almost made me laugh out loud when I heard it, but I stayed silent. I let the world do what it does, balance the scales. Word spread about her affair, not from me, but from the handful of people she had once wronged. Turns out, karma doesn't need a schedule, it just shows up. She lost followers, clients, credibility. But the final piece of the puzzle came when I least expected it. One day, I received a thick envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a printed letter and several photographs. They were grainy but clear enough. Pictures of Lindsay, smiling too widely, clinking glasses with yet another man. This one looked younger, maybe one of her interns. The letter was from Alan's ex-wife. I hadn't heard from her since the fallout, but she'd apparently kept an eye on Lindsay out of curiosity, or maybe the same quiet vengeance I had carried. In the letter, she thanked me, said my confrontation at the restaurant gave her the courage to face the truth in her own home. She'd taken her kids, gotten a degree, and was now working in family law to help other women rebuild their lives. She said I gave her that push. I didn't know how to respond, didn't even know if I should. But reading those words hit something deep. It reminded me that sometimes the pain we go through plants seeds in others, seeds of change, of strength, of resolve. And that right there is the real endgame. A few months later, I attended a charity event for a cause I'd long supported, youth mentoring programs. As I mingled with attendees, I was introduced to a woman named Elena. She was nothing like Lindsay. Quiet confidence, thoughtful eyes, and the kind of laugh that didn't ask for attention. We talked for over an hour about everything but relationships, travel, food, books. I didn't tell her my story. She didn't tell me hers. It was just two people talking. It felt normal, human. We exchanged numbers, but I didn't expect anything. 2 days later, she texted, "That book you mentioned? I started reading it. You were right, it's not what I expected." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't a spark or fireworks. It was better. It was steady. Honest. We met again. Then again. No games, no pressure. Just two people carrying their own histories. meeting at the intersection of peace. I took it slow. Pain had made me cautious, but it had also made me clear. I told her the truth about Lindsay when the time was right, not to scare her, not to bleed on her, but because she deserved to know the terrain I'd walked through. She listened without judgment, just held my gaze and said, "I'm glad you made it through." That's all. No pity, no probing, just presence. I don't know where it will go. I'm not trying to define it. But I've learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't someone else's downfall, it's your own rising. It's waking up without a pit in your stomach. It's eating dinner without staring at a phone, wondering who they're texting. It's standing in a room full of strangers and realizing you've reclaimed your self-worth. Quietly, fully. One evening, I drove past the old house. It was dusk. Lights were on. A car I didn't recognize was parked in the driveway. I didn't slow down, didn't stare, I just kept driving. Because that chapter was over, and I'd written my ending the way I wanted, with dignity, with clarity. Not everyone gets closure. I was lucky enough to find mine, not in her apology, which never came, but in my own resolve to rebuild. Lindsay tried to reduce me to someone small, someone broken, but I became someone bigger. Not out of rage, out of choice. You don't have to destroy someone to win. Sometimes, you just have to walk away so completely that they're left talking to shadows. And as for revenge, it's not loud, it's not violent. It's the life you build after they thought they ruined you. And I'm living mine, one peaceful day at a time.